on the corner of a bustling city street, where the hum of cars and chatter of pedestrians drowned out all but the loudest noises. A young girl named Lila stood in the cold. She was small for her age, barely 10 years old, with a worn violin clutched in her tiny hands. Her coat was too thin for the brisk weather, and her shoes were scuffed, but none of that seemed to matter to her. She had something that no one else on that busy street had, a gift. Lila played her violin with a passion that belied her age. The notes she coaxed from the instrument rose above the din of the city, weaving a melody so pure and haunting that it occasionally made passers-by stop in their tracks. But most hurried on, too busy or indifferent to notice the beauty she was creating. The storefront behind her was a high-end jewelry boutique, owned by a man named Victor Langston. Victor was a man of considerable wealth and ambition, known for his impeccable taste and sharp business acumen. He was less known for his compassion, as those who worked for him could attest. To Victor, Lila was nothing more than a nuisance, a street urchin whose presence outside his store tarnished its pristine image. "Doesn't that girl have somewhere else to be?" he grumbled one afternoon, glaring at her through the glass window. His assistant, a nervous young man named Peter, shrugged. "She's been here for weeks," Peter said. "I think she plays to earn money." Victor scoffed. "She's scaring away customers. Get rid of her." Peter hesitated. "She's just a kid. Maybe we could just do it," Victor snapped, cutting him off. The next day, Peter approached Lila with an apologetic look. "Hey, kid," he said gently. "You can't play here anymore. The boss doesn't want you outside the store." Lila looked up at him with wide, solemn eyes. "I'm not hurting anyone," she said. "I just need to earn a little money to help my mom." Peter's heart sank, but his hands were tied. "I know, but it's not up to me." Lila nodded silently and packed up her violin. For the next few days, she played on different corners, but none of them drew as much foot traffic as the boutique. Her earnings dwindled, and the worry in her mother's eyes grew deeper. By the end of the week, Lila returned to her usual spot outside Victor's store, determined to make enough to buy groceries for the weekend. Victor was livid when he saw her again. He stormed out of the store, his expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. "Didn't I tell you to leave?" he barked. Lila looked up at him, clutching her violin tightly. "I'm just playing music," she said softly. "Well, play it somewhere else," Victor snapped. "This is private property." Before Lila could respond, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb, and a well-dressed man stepped out. He was tall and commanding, his tailored suit and polished demeanor exuding wealth and influence. Victor's demeanor changed instantly. "Mr. Cavendish," Victor said, plastering on a fake smile. "What a pleasure to see you." The man, Gregory Cavendish, ignored Victor entirely. His attention was fixed on Lila, who had frozen in place, her violin halfway to her shoulder. "Play something," Gregory said, his deep voice cutting through the tension. Lila hesitated, then lifted her violin and began to play. The melody that poured out was raw and emotional, a mix of sadness and hope that seemed to silence the world around them. Gregory stood perfectly still, his eyes narrowing as he listened. When she finished, he clapped slowly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lila," she replied shyly. "Lila," he repeated. "You have a gift." Victor, sensing the shift in Gregory's mood, stepped forward. "She's been a problem here, Mr. Cavendish," he said quickly. "I've been trying to—" "Enough," Gregory interrupted, his tone sharp. He looked at Victor with a mix of disappointment and disdain. "This child is no problem. She's an artist, something you clearly don't appreciate." Victor opened his mouth to argue, but thought better of it. Gregory turned back to Lila. "Where do you live?" he asked. Lila hesitated, glancing at Victor. Gregory crouched down to her level, softening his tone. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I just want to help." "I live in the apartments down the street," Lila said finally, "with my mom." Gregory nodded and straightened. "I'd like to meet her," he said. "Would that be all right?" Lila nodded slowly, unsure of what to make of this stranger. Gregory glanced at Victor one last time before saying, "You could learn something from her." As Gregory followed Lila toward her home, Victor watched them go, a mix of confusion and unease churning in his gut. He had a feeling this encounter was going to change everything, and not just for the girl. Gregory followed Lila down a few blocks to a rundown apartment building. The structure was worn, its bricks chipped, and its windows streaked with grime. Inside, the air smelled faintly of mildew, and the narrow stairwell creaked with every step. Gregory, used to the finest luxuries, was visibly uncomfortable but kept his composure. Lila stopped at a door on the third floor. She knocked twice before a tired voice called, "Come in." The apartment was small, barely furnished, but tidy. A woman sat at the kitchen table, her shoulders hunched over a pile of bills. She looked up, surprised to see Gregory enter behind her daughter. "Mom, this is Mr. Cavendish," Lila said. "He wanted to meet you." The woman, who introduced herself as Maria, stood quickly and smoothed her worn dress. "It's a pleasure to meet you," she said nervously. "Is Lila in trouble?" "No," Gregory assured her. "In fact, I'm here because of her talent. She's an extraordinary violinist." Maria's expression softened as she glanced at her daughter. "She is," she said. "Her father taught her before he passed away. She's been playing ever since." Gregory nodded, taking in the worn violin resting on the table. "She deserves more than a street corner," he said. "Have you considered formal lessons or auditions?" Maria laughed bitterly. "I can barely afford rent. Lessons aren't an option." Gregory didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took out a business card and handed it to Maria. "I'd like to help. If you'll allow me, I can arrange for Lila to study at the conservatory where I'm on the board. She has a gift that shouldn't go to waste." Maria stared at the card, unsure of how to respond. "Why would you do that for us?" Gregory smiled faintly. "Because talent like hers doesn't come around often. And because I believe in giving back." Lila looked up at her mother, her eyes wide with hope. Maria hesitated, then nodded. "All right," she said softly. "If it's truly no cost to us, we'll accept." Gregory shook her hand firmly. "I'll make the arrangements." As he left the apartment, Gregory felt a rare sense of satisfaction. But as he walked back to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that this act of generosity might complicate his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. The next day, Gregory fulfilled his promise. He contacted the conservatory where he served as a patron and arranged for Lila to audition that very week. The instructors, skeptical at first about a street performer, reluctantly agreed to see her. Gregory returned to Maria's apartment with the news. Lila practically leapt from her chair when he told her. "A real audition?" she asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Yes," Gregory said with a small smile. "They'll provide a scholarship if you impress them, and I have no doubt you will." Maria looked hesitant. "This is happening so fast. What if she's not ready?" "She's ready," Gregory replied confidently. "I'll have someone help prepare her." He arranged for a private music coach, a retired violinist named Eleanor, who met Lila in the evenings after school. Eleanor was strict but kind, pushing Lila to refine her technique while nurturing her raw talent. Lila soaked up every lesson, her passion shining brighter with each session. The day of the audition arrived faster than anyone expected. Gregory personally picked up Lila and Maria in his car, a luxury they had never experienced before. Lila's hands trembled as she clutched her violin case. "Just do what you always do," Gregory said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Play from your heart." The conservatory was a grand building, its marble floors and high ceilings intimidating. Lila's small frame seemed almost swallowed by the grandeur as they entered the audition hall. Gregory, sensing her nerves, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got this," he said softly. When Lila stepped onto the stage, the judges barely glanced at her, their expressions indifferent. But when she began to play, the room transformed. Her music was haunting, filled with emotion that silenced even the most skeptical judge. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The lead judge stood and applauded, something Gregory had never seen in all his years as a patron. That, the judge said, was extraordinary. "Welcome to the conservatory, Miss Lila." Lila beamed, tears streaming down her cheeks as she looked at Gregory and Maria. For the first time in her life, she felt like the world was opening up to her. But as they left the conservatory, Gregory noticed Victor standing across the street, watching them with a scowl. Gregory's act of kindness had not gone unnoticed, and he had a sinking feeling Victor would find a way to complicate things. Lila's acceptance into the conservatory became the talk of the week in Gregory's circles. Patrons and board members marveled at his ability to discover such raw talent, with some even commending his philanthropic gesture. But not everyone was impressed. Victor, still seething from his public embarrassment, saw this as an opportunity to strike back. Victor didn't understand why Gregory cared so much about a street musician, but he resented how it painted him as heartless. He began digging into Maria and Lila's lives, determined to find something that could discredit Gregory's newfound reputation as a benefactor. Meanwhile, Lila's life had changed dramatically. She started attending the conservatory every afternoon, practicing tirelessly with Eleanor's guidance. She often caught herself daydreaming during lessons, imagining herself on grand stages. Maria watched her daughter's transformation with a mixture of pride and worry. "I don't want you to get hurt if this doesn't work out," she told Lila one evening. "It will," Lila said with quiet determination. "I'll make it work." Gregory, too, was invested in her success. He attended board meetings to secure funding for Lila's scholarship and even arranged for her to perform at an upcoming gala showcasing young talent. It would be her first public performance in front of an elite audience, and Gregory knew it could be a turning point. But Victor wasn't about to let that happen easily. One afternoon, Victor appeared unannounced at Maria's apartment. He knocked forcefully, his expression cold when Maria opened the door. "Mrs. Rivera, isn't it?" he said with a saccharine tone. "I'm Victor Langston. I own the boutique where your daughter used to play." Maria's stomach tightened. "What do you want?" Victor smiled thinly. "I'm just curious. Isn't it interesting how quickly things have changed for you and your daughter? A stranger swoops in, promises you the world, and now you're rubbing elbows with the city's elite." Maria stiffened. "Gregory is helping us because he believes in Lila. He's been nothing but kind." "Oh, I'm sure he has," Victor said, stepping closer. "But nothing in this world comes for free. Do you really think this will last? That he'll keep supporting you if things get complicated?" Maria shut the door firmly, her heart racing. She didn't trust Victor, but his words planted a seed of doubt. What if Gregory's support was temporary? What if Lila's dreams came crashing down? When Gregory stopped by later that evening to check on Lila's progress, Maria confronted him. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked bluntly. "Why us?" Gregory was taken aback, but answered honestly. "Because Lila has a gift, and I have the means to nurture it. That's all there is to it." Maria wasn't entirely convinced, but chose not to press further. Gregory sensed her unease, but attributed it to nerves about Lila's upcoming performance. What he didn't know was that Victor's meddling had already begun to take its toll. As the gala approached, Victor made his move, planting subtle doubts among the conservatory board members about Lila's background and whether her scholarship was truly deserved. He hoped to sabotage her debut and, in the process, tarnish Gregory's reputation. Unaware of the storm brewing behind the scenes, Lila focused entirely on her music. She practiced late into the night, driven by the dream of proving herself. Gregory, too, was determined to make the evening a success, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Victor's shadow loomed over them. The night of the gala arrived, bringing with it an air of anticipation and an undercurrent of tension. Gregory promised himself that no matter what Victor had planned, Lila's performance would shine through. But as the lights dimmed and the crowd quieted, he couldn't ignore the sense that the stakes had never been higher. The grand ballroom was alive with chatter as New York's elite gathered for the conservatory gala. Glittering chandeliers illuminated the room, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Lila stood backstage, clutching her violin tightly. Her heart raced, but Gregory's reassuring presence beside her offered some comfort. "You've got this," Gregory said, his voice calm and steady. "Just remember, play from your heart." Lila nodded, taking a deep breath. Eleanor had drilled into her that this was her moment to shine, and she intended to do just that. Out in the audience, Victor moved through the crowd, his expression smug. He had whispered just enough rumors to ensure that many of the patrons were already doubting Lila's place on the stage. His plan was simple: cast enough doubt, and when Lila faltered, even slightly, it would validate his claims. When Lila stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She looked out at the sea of faces, many unfamiliar, some skeptical. Her hands trembled as she lifted the violin to her shoulder. Gregory caught her eye from his seat in the front row and gave her a small nod of encouragement. The first note was hesitant, wavering slightly, but as Lila continued, her confidence grew. Her melody filled the room, weaving a story of sorrow and hope so poignant that it silenced even the harshest critics. By the time she finished, the room erupted into applause. Some were even moved to tears. But just as Gregory began to feel a sense of triumph, Victor struck. He stood and clapped exaggeratedly, his voice cutting through the crowd. "Quite the performance for someone plucked off the streets," he said loudly, his tone dripping with condescension. The room quieted as heads turned toward Victor. Lila froze, her joy fading into confusion and fear. Gregory stood, his expression dark. "What exactly are you insinuating, Victor?" he asked, his voice sharp. Victor shrugged, feigning innocence. "Only that it's curious how a girl with no formal training suddenly finds herself on this stage. Are we sure this scholarship wasn't handed out based on pity rather than merit?" The tension in the room was palpable. Lila's eyes brimmed with tears, and she looked to Gregory, who stepped forward. "This girl has more talent than most of us could dream of," Gregory said, his voice steady but firm. "And everything she's achieved, she's earned through hard work and perseverance. If you can't see that, Victor, then perhaps you're not the judge of character you think you are." The room erupted in murmurs, and one of the judges from the conservatory stood to address the crowd. "Lila's talent speaks for itself," he said. "Her scholarship was awarded because she deserves it." Victor's smug expression faltered as the room applauded once again, this time louder than before. Gregory turned to Lila, his eyes kind. "Take a bow," he said softly. She did, the applause washing over her like a wave of redemption. But as she left the stage, Gregory couldn't help but wonder if Victor's interference was truly over, or if this was only the beginning. The day after the gala, Lila's performance was the talk of the city's elite. Many praised her talent and resilience, and offers for future performances began trickling in. However, the tension Victor had sown lingered, casting a shadow over the triumph. Back at Maria's apartment, Gregory visited to reassure them. "You were remarkable, Lila," he said. "Don't let anyone like Victor make you doubt yourself." Lila smiled faintly but remained quiet. She had heard Victor's comments and couldn't shake the fear that others might share his doubts. Maria, too, was concerned. "What if he keeps coming after her?" she asked Gregory. "He won't," Gregory said firmly. "I won't let him." But Victor wasn't done. That evening, Gregory received an anonymous tip from a reporter seeking to confirm a rumor that Lila's background had been fabricated to tug at the heartstrings of wealthy donors. Gregory knew it had Victor's fingerprints all over it. Rather than ignore it, Gregory acted. He called a press conference, inviting reporters to the conservatory. Standing beside Lila and Maria, he told their story, how Lila had been discovered, how she had worked tirelessly to earn her place, and how her performance had silenced critics. When it was Lila's turn to speak, she faced the cameras with newfound confidence. "I've worked hard for everything I've achieved," she said, "and I'll keep working hard, no matter what anyone says." The conference ended with applause, and the story quickly shifted in her favor. Victor's attempt to discredit her had backfired, leaving his reputation tarnished instead. As Gregory left the event with Lila and Maria, he felt a rare sense of relief. But deep down, he knew Victor's bitterness wasn't something that would disappear easily, and that Lila's journey was far from over. The fallout from Victor's failed smear campaign rippled through their lives. Gregory ensured Lila continued to receive support from the conservatory, and her confidence blossomed. She threw herself into her music, determined to prove that she belonged. However, Victor wasn't entirely defeated. Behind the scenes, he began spreading subtle doubts among donors, questioning Gregory's intentions. "Is this really about helping a gifted child?" he would say slyly, Or is Gregory using her for his own reputation? The whispers reached Gregory, but he dismissed them. He knew that as long as Lila focused on her music, the truth would shine brighter than any rumor. But for Maria, the constant questioning weighed heavily. "I don't want her caught in the middle of this," she told Gregory one evening. "She's just a child." "She's also incredibly strong," Gregory said gently. "And so are you." As Lila's next big performance approached, a solo recital at the conservatory, Victor's efforts escalated. A week before the event, an anonymous letter arrived at the conservatory, accusing Lila of being coached by Gregory to gain sympathy and questioning whether she deserved her place. The conservatory's board called an emergency meeting, summoning Gregory and Lila. When Gregory walked into the room, he was greeted by skeptical faces. Lila sat nervously beside him, clutching her violin case. One of the board members spoke first. "We've received troubling allegations," he said. "While we have no reason to doubt Lila's talent, this situation casts a shadow over her performance. Perhaps it would be better if she withdrew from the recital." Lila's face fell, but Gregory remained calm. "If there's doubt," he said firmly, "let her prove herself. No politics, no rumors, just music. Let her play for you right now." The board hesitated but agreed. Lila stepped to the center of the room, her hands trembling as she lifted her violin. The first notes were hesitant, but as she played, the room filled with the same haunting beauty that had captivated the gala audience. By the time she finished, the room was silent, except for one board member softly clapping. "She doesn't need to prove anything more," the member said. "Lila's place here is beyond question." As Gregory and Lila left the meeting, relief washed over them. But Gregory knew this victory was fragile. Victor had lost this round, but his persistence meant there was still more to come. For now, though, Gregory focused on one thing: making sure Lila's recital was a triumph she would never forget. The night of Lila's recital arrived, and the conservatory's grand hall was filled to capacity. Patrons, musicians, and reporters all gathered, eager to hear the young prodigy who had defied expectations. Gregory sat in the front row, flanked by Maria, whose nervous pride was palpable. Backstage, Lila paced, her violin in hand. Eleanor, her mentor, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've done the work, Lila. Now, let them see who you are." Lila nodded, her resolve firming. She stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. The audience hushed as she positioned her violin and began to play. From the first note, she owned the room. The melody she crafted was raw and emotional, telling a story of struggle, hope, and triumph. Each note resonated with the audience, silencing even the most skeptical whispers. By the time she finished, the hall erupted in applause, with some rising to their feet. Gregory, unable to hide his emotion, clapped loudly, a proud smile on his face. Maria wiped away tears, her heart swelling with joy. But it wasn't just Lila who had something to prove that night. In the back of the room, Victor stood quietly, watching as the audience gave Lila a standing ovation. He had no more moves to play, and he knew it. His jealousy and bitterness had been defeated by the undeniable power of Lila's talent and Gregory's determination. After the recital, Lila was surrounded by well-wishers and admirers. Gregory and Maria stood off to the side, watching her bask in the moment she had worked so hard to achieve. "She's going to be incredible," Maria said softly. "She already is," Gregory replied. As the crowd began to thin, Lila approached Gregory and Maria, her face glowing with pride. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "for believing in me." Gregory knelt to meet her eyes. "We didn't just believe in you, Lila. We saw what you were capable of, and you proved it to the world." That night marked the beginning of a new chapter for Lila. Offers poured in from prestigious music schools and organizations, and she continued to grow as a musician. Gregory, Maria, and Lila remained close, their lives forever intertwined by the journey they had shared. As for Victor, his reputation never fully recovered. The whispers he had spread turned against him, leaving him isolated in the world he had once ruled. Meanwhile, Gregory found a renewed sense of purpose, dedicating himself to helping other young talents like Lila. In the end, Lila's music didn't just change her life. It transformed everyone around her, proving that talent, when nurtured by belief and kindness, could overcome even the most insurmountable odds. Victor wasn't ready to give up. Despite Lila's success at the recital, he couldn't let Gregory's act of generosity overshadow his own reputation. Fueled by bitterness, Victor devised one final plan. He would challenge the legitimacy of Lila's story publicly. 2 days after the recital, Victor held a press event outside his boutique. He claimed that Lila's rise was fabricated, an elaborate story crafted to tug at donors' heartstrings. Is it truly about talent, he declared, or a ploy to boost Gregory's image? The accusation spread quickly, casting doubt once again on Lila's achievements. Gregory was furious, but knew he couldn't respond with anger. Instead, he invited a journalist to meet with him, Maria and Lila, in their home. They shared their story in full, from Lila's humble beginnings to her relentless dedication to music. Lila even played for the journalist, her passion and skill silencing any lingering doubts. The resulting article painted a vivid and heartfelt picture of Lila's journey, dismantling Victor's claims. The public rallied around Lila, condemning Victor's attempt to undermine her. Even patrons of his boutique began to distance themselves, tarnishing his business further. Victor, now fully defeated, retreated from the public eye. Meanwhile, Gregory focused on preparing Lila for her next big opportunity, a performance at a national music competition. For the first time, it felt like her path was finally clear, free from Victor's shadow. The day of the national music competition arrived, marking the culmination of Lila's journey from a street performer to a rising star. The grand auditorium buzzed with anticipation as contestants from across the country prepared to showcase their talent. Lila stood backstage, clutching her violin, her nerves tempered by weeks of relentless practice. Gregory and Maria sat in the audience, their pride and excitement palpable. Gregory leaned over to Maria. No matter what happens today, she's already achieved more than anyone could have imagined. Maria nodded, her eyes shining. She wouldn't be here without you. When Lila stepped onto the stage, a hush fell over the audience. She positioned her violin and closed her eyes, letting the world fade away. Then she began to play. Her performance was transcendent. The notes wove a tapestry of emotion, capturing joy, pain, and hope in a way that left the audience spellbound. By the time she finished, the applause was thunderous. Judges and spectators alike gave her a standing ovation. When the results were announced, Lila was named the winner, earning a scholarship to one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. She held her trophy tightly as tears streamed down her face, the culmination of years of struggle and resilience. Backstage, Gregory and Maria embraced her. "You've shown the world what you're capable of," Gregory said, his voice thick with emotion. "And this is only the beginning," Maria added, her pride radiating. The victory was more than just a title. It was a symbol of how far Lila had come and the promise of what lay ahead. As they left the competition hall, Gregory felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. Helping Lila had changed her life, but it had also given his own life renewed purpose. From that moment on, Lila's path was clear. With the support of Gregory and Maria, she continued to rise in the world of music, inspiring others with her story of resilience and talent. And for Gregory, this journey reminded him of the power of kindness and the extraordinary impact of believing in someone when they need it most. In the end, Lila's music didn't just transform her own life. It became a beacon of hope for everyone who heard it, proving that talent, heart, and a little help from those who care can change the world.